The wind carried dust like ash from a dying fire. It scoured the settlement of Bitter Creek, a place no mapmaker cared to mark, where the earth cracked under boots and even the church steeple leaned as though tired of standing watch. On that afternoon of late summer, the townsfolk gathered outside the Harrow homestead, lured not by celebration nor sermon, but by cruelty. Lilith Harrow stood barefoot in the dirt yard, her dress torn where a hand had dragged her down. Her face was pale, but her eyes, grey as storm clouds, held steady though her body trembled. Two little girls clung to her skirts, Rosemary, 8 years old and sharp-eyed as a hawk, and June, only 5, with curls matted by tears. The man who claimed them, Virgil Harrow, strode before the crowd with a whiskey-sour sneer. A rancher by trade, but a drunk by habit, his boots crunched the brittle ground as he circled his wife like a crow waiting for a carcass to still. In his hand, a leather belt. "You shame me, Lilith," he spat, voice carrying. "3 times you labored, 3 times you birthed me nothing but girls. Useless mouths. Where's my son? Heh? Where's the boy who'll carry my name?" Each word was a lash before the belt even struck. When it did, the sound cracked like a shot. Lilith flinched but did not fall. The girls screamed, clutching her tighter. Neighbors shifted uneasily. They'd seen this before. Some looked away. Others muttered that it wasn't their place. In Bitter Creek, silence was the cheapest kind of survival. From the edge of the crowd, a lone man watched. He leaned against the hitching post, hat pulled low, eyes dark beneath its brim. His name was Jedediah Kane. A widowed cowboy, scarred by grief deeper than most could fathom. His wife and infant son had been taken by fever 5 winters back, leaving him with nothing but a weathered cabin and a silence that swallowed the nights whole. He said nothing yet, but his jaw was set like stone. Virgil lifted the belt again, shouting, "This woman's cursed. These girls, curses too. I should sell 'em to the orphan train, be rid of their whining." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Rosemary buried her face in her mother's side. June whispered, "Mama, make him stop." Lilith pressed the girls behind her, shielding them with her small frame. Her left hand curled tight around her wedding band, bent from years of wear, its tarnished shine the only proof of vows long broken. She closed her fingers until the metal cut into her skin, as though the pain might anchor her. Virgil turned to the onlookers, grinning wild. "Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me a man's worth is in daughters, not sons." Silence answered, until one voice broke it. "No man's worth comes from the hurt he gives." All eyes swung to Jedediah Kane. He stepped from the shade, slow and deliberate, boots heavy on the dust. His gaze never left Virgil's. Virgil sneered. "And what business is it of yours, Kane? You got no family. Nothing but ghosts." Jedediah stopped a few feet away, his shadow falling across the girls. He spoke low, steady. "If you won't raise 'em proud, I will." The words struck harder than any belt. The crowd stilled. Virgil barked a laugh, mean and hollow. "Take 'em, then. Take the cursed lot. You'll see what misery is." With a shove, he sent Lilith stumbling toward Jedediah. Then he spat in the dirt and strode off toward the saloon, his belt dragging like a snake behind him. Silence lingered, broken only by the sobs of children and the whisper of wind. Jedediah knelt before the girls. His weathered hands that once held his own child, shook as he removed a silver locket from his pocket. The locket was tarnished but carefully kept. It had belonged to his late wife. He placed it in Rosemary's trembling hand. "Keep this safe. Means you're safe, too." Rosemary blinked through tears, confused but comforted. Lilith, still trembling, met his gaze. For the first time, she saw not pity, but recognition. A soul that knew loss, yet chose kindness still. Behind them, the church bell tolled the hour. Hollow, mournful, like a judgment that had already been made. The crowd dispersed, murmuring. But Jedediah did not move. He only tipped his hat, steady as the mountain ridges beyond, and said, "Come on. My place ain't much, but it's better'n this." And so, beneath the fading light of a red Wyoming sun, Lilith and her daughters left behind the man who had broken them, following a stranger whose silence spoke more than Virgil's rage ever could. The Kane homestead sat a mile beyond the edge of Bitter Creek, where the land rolled into lonely hills and the cottonwoods leaned over a trickling creek bed. The cabin was plain, Logs chinked with clay, a sagging porch, and a single corral that creaked whenever the wind came hard off the plains. When Jedediah led Lilith and the girls inside, the air smelled of pine resin, old tobacco, and ashes that hadn't been stirred in days. A narrow bed stood in one corner, a rough-hewn table in the other. Everything was spare, functional, untouched by a woman's hand for years. Lilith's heart thudded as though she had crossed into some outlaw's den, though Jedediah's silence told her otherwise. She clutched her daughters close, the bent wedding band still hidden in her fist. The girls stared at the cabin with wide, uncertain eyes. Jedediah set his hat on a peg, his voice rough but even. "My bed stays mine. Yours is yours. You and the little ones take the loft. Ain't charity, just decency." The words startled her. Not command, not cruelty. Just rules laid down simple. He built a fire, kneeling with the kind of patience she had not seen in years. The crackle of flames slowly pushed back the chill. He laid out blankets in the loft and carried up straw mattresses without a word. That first night, Lilith slept lightly, curled around her daughters. Every creak of the timbers set her on edge. She half expected rough hands, harsh words, the blow of a belt. But none came. Only the sound of Jedediah's boots pacing below as though he, too, could not sleep. The mornings came hard and bright. Jedediah rose before dawn, setting coffee on the stove and whistling a tune low and mournful. The girls watched him with shy eyes. When June dropped a cup one morning and the tin clattered to the floor, Lilith's body tensed for the punishment she knew was coming. Jedediah only crouched, picked it up, and ruffled June's curls. "Ain't the first thing broke in this house. Won't be the last." Then he poured her milk as if nothing had happened. Lilith stared at him, her breath caught in her throat. Such small mercies felt heavier than gold. Later, she tried to bake bread from the flour he kept in a barrel. Her hands shook as she kneaded. The loaf burned black at the edges. She placed it on the table, ashamed. Jedediah broke off a piece, chewed slow, and said simply, "Fills the belly. That's what counts." He finished the whole slice without flinching. That night, when the girls slept, Lilith wept quietly into her hands, not from pain, but from the strange kindness that unnerved her more than cruelty ever had. Weeks unfolded in small fires and trials. A Rosemary learned to scatter feed for chickens, her laughter carrying across the yard like birdsong. A June clung to Jedediah's leg whenever he went to saddle his horse, whispering, "Don't leave long." A Lilith scrubbed clothes by the creek, hands raw, but found herself humming the hymns her mother once sang. Still, shadows lingered. In town, gossip swirled. "The useless Harrow woman," they whispered, already under another man's roof. The sting of it burned her cheeks when she fetched supplies. Jedediah overheard one such whisper outside the mercantile. He stepped forward, his shadow long across the boardwalk. His words were quiet, but sharp as a knife. "She's with me now. You'll speak with respect." The gossips fell silent. Lilith, standing behind him, felt her spine straighten for the first time in years. One evening, a storm rolled in from the mountains, thunder shaking the cabin walls. Rain battered the roof, and lightning split the sky. Rosemary, already flushed with fever from the day's chill, began to cough until her small chest rattled. Panic gripped Lilith like a noose. She pressed cool cloths to her daughter's brow, whispering prayers, but Rosemary's breaths grew shallow. Jedediah saw the terror in her eyes. Without a word, he pulled on his slicker and boots. "Where are you going?" Lilith cried over the roar of rain. "For the dock. The storm." But he was already gone, a shadow against the lightning. Hours bled like lifetimes. Lilith sat clutching her daughters in the flickering firelight, listening for hoofbeats through the storm. She half feared she would never see him again, that he, too, would vanish like every promise in her life. Then, near dawn, the door burst open. Jedediah staggered in, soaked to the bone, a satchel of medicines in hand. His face was cut by branches, his breath ragged, but in his eyes burned a steady flame. "Doc said fever'll break with this." He handed her the vials, voice roughened by cold. "She'll make it." Lilith's hands trembled as she mixed the draught. She guided it to Rosemary's lips, whispering. Slowly, the child's breathing eased. But the town had seen. They had seen the woman once called useless, shoulders squared against firelight, dragging life from the jaws of flame. And they had seen Jedediah Cain, silent and steady, risking his skin for a man who deserved none. That night, back at the cabin, Jedediah sat with blistered hands. Lilith washed them gently, dipping cloth in cool water. The girls slept upstairs, exhausted. For a long while, neither spoke. The fire snapped in the hearth, its glow soft against rough-hewn walls. At last Jedediah said, voice low, "Your girls, they remind me the world ain't done with me yet." Lilith's hands paused. She lifted her gaze. His eyes held hers, steady, searching. Her heart pounded. No man had ever looked at her without demand, without hunger or cruelty. Only truth. Only respect. Her fingers lingered on his scarred knuckles. A silence filled the room, heavy, aching, almost too much to bear. But he pulled his hand back gently, as though the moment was a fragile thing not yet ready to be broken. He stood, adjusted his hat, and muttered, "Best get rest. Tomorrow'll be long." She watched him retreat to his own bed, the air between them alive with everything unsaid. Upstairs, the silver locket swayed in the window, catching the moonlight like a promise not yet claimed. But Virgil was not done. Humiliated, scarred, and stripped of his home, he swore vengeance. The saloon whispered of it, of a man too proud to let go, too drunk to think straight, gathering men of his kind. And so the shadow of threat grew long, creeping toward the Cain homestead with each passing dusk. The prairie at dusk looked bruised, the sky painted in purples and reds that bled into the horizon. A storm of another kind was gathering. Word reached Bitter Creek that Virgil Harrow wasn't alone anymore. He'd found two rough men in the saloon, drifters with empty eyes and quick tempers, willing to ride with him for whiskey and coin. Lilith sensed it before the news came. A chill in the air, the way the coyotes yipped restless in the hills, the unease that settled into her bones as she tucked her daughters into bed. She sat by the window, fingers tracing the bent wedding band she still kept hidden in her pocket. A token of change she had yet to cast away. Jedediah loaded his rifle at the table, quiet as ever. His movements were steady, no rush, no panic. Just a man preparing for what he always knew might come. Lilith whispered, "His coming, isn't he?" Jedediah didn't look up. A man like that don't let go easy. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "If he takes them, if he takes my girls." Jedediah's eyes lifted then, dark and unflinching. "He won't." The hoofbeats came at twilight. 3 riders cresting the ridge, their silhouettes jagged against the dying sun. Virgil in front, swaying slightly in the saddle, a pistol gleaming in his hand. They rode hard toward the cabin, dust rising like smoke behind them. The sound of it rattled the windows, stirred the chickens into frenzy. Jedediah stepped onto the porch, rifle cradled in his arms. He didn't shout, didn't curse, just stood like a sentinel, the weight of mountains in his stance. Lilith came to stand beside him, lantern in hand. Her knees shook, but she did not hide behind him. Not anymore. The riders drew up short, hooves pouring the earth. Virgil's laugh was harsh as a crow's call. "You think you can steal my wife, my blood, my name, and live easy? No, Cain. Tonight I take back what's mine, or I burn it all down." Jedediah's voice was even, carrying across the prairie air. "You never owned them. Not then. Not now." Virgil's face twisted, rage boiling over. He spurred his horse forward, gun raised. The world exploded. Gunfire cracked through the evening. Jedediah's rifle roared, shattering glass as bullets splintered wood. One of the hired men fell, clutching his shoulder, crying out before galloping into the darkness. The other cursed, firing wild, until the panic overtook him and he fled as well. Virgil dismounted, stumbling toward the porch, pistol steady despite the whiskey in his veins. His eyes gleamed with madness. Inside, the girls huddled beneath the table. Rosemary wrapped her arms around June, whispering, "Mama's strong now. Don't be afraid." The silver locket swung above them in the window, flashing with each gunshot like a beacon. Virgil kicked through the door, wood splintering. His pistol swung toward Jedediah, who dove behind the table, rifle empty. Lilith stood frozen in the center of the room, lantern in one hand, fire poker in the other. Her breath came ragged, her heart pounding louder than the thunder of hooves. Virgil snarled, "You'll crawl back, Lilith. Crawl, or I'll bury him right here. For a heartbeat, she saw her life in his eyes, the years of fear, the belt, the shame, the daughters growing into the same chains. And then something inside her broke loose. No, she whispered. She raised the lantern high. The flame threw her shadow tall across the wall, towering over him. Virgil blinked, startled, just long enough. With a cry torn from the marrow of her soul, she swung the fire poker. Iron met flesh with a sickening crack. Virgil staggered, gun falling from his hand. He crashed to the floor, blood streaking his temple, groaning like a wounded beast. The room fell silent, save for the ragged breaths of the living. Jedediah rose slowly, eyes wide. Not in shock, but in a kind of reverence. He looked at her as though seeing her for the first time, not as a broken woman, but as a fire that had survived hell and come out burning brighter. Lilith's hand shook. The poker slipped from her grasp. She collapsed to her knees, tears spilling hot down her cheeks. Jedediah crouched beside her, steadying her shoulders. His voice was rough, but steady. Proud. That's what they'll be. 'Cause you made 'em so. And for the first time, she wept not from fear, but from release. Virgil was dragged away by the law the next morning, broken and defeated, his threats nothing more than ash. The town saw everything. The belt-wielding tyrant brought low not by a man's hand, but by the strength of the woman he tried to break. Whispers turned to silence. Silence to respect. Lilith no longer bent her head when she walked through town. Jedediah never spoke of the fight, never claimed the victory. He only mended the door, swept the broken glass, and carried on as if this was the way it had always been. But something between them had shifted, quiet as dawn. Spring came. Rain fell across the plains, coaxing wildflowers from the soil and filling the creek with laughter. The cabin yard, once barren, softened with green. One morning, Lilith and Jedediah stood side by side with the girls, planting young apple trees near the porch. The girls pressed seeds into the earth with eager fingers. Jedediah covered them gently, his hands steady. While Lilith poured water, the bent wedding band finally cast aside into the soil. On one branch, Rosemary tied the silver locket, letting it dangle like a charm. The sunlight caught it, scattering warmth across the budding leaves. Jedediah glanced at Lilith. She met his gaze, her eyes no longer clouded with shame, but alive with something steadier, stronger. No words were spoken. None needed. The prairie stretched wide and endless around them, but for the first time, Lilith did not feel small within it. She felt rooted, and as the apple trees took hold, so too did hope, growing, fragile yet unyielding, in the hardest soil of all.